Good afternoon, and thank you to everyone for being here on this beautiful day. I'm Amy Barish, the Executive Director of Her Justice. We're a nonprofit that connects women living in poverty to free legal help across New York City. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to recognize some of the very many special guests we have with us today. It probably goes without remarking that we are joined today by House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi, Parkland survivor Alea Eastman, Carol Mason, President of John Jay College of Criminal Justice, thank you for hosting us. We also have here today Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, Congressman Jerry Nadler, Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, Councilmember Idanis Rodriguez, Councilmember Andy King, Councilmember Bill Perkins, and Jim Furillo, Executive Director of the New York State Nurses Association. We're also joined by Melissa DeRosa, Secretary to the Governor, it's an applauding crowd. Alfonso David, Counsel to the Governor, and all members of the Governor's Cabinet who joined us today. A round of applause for the Cabinet. And we have a phenomenal group of advocates, many of them my colleagues here today. I want to call out a few names. Joe Torre, founder of the Safe at Home Initiative, is here. Monisha Smith, Everytown for Gun Safety. Maria Cuomo Cole, Mayor Andrew Gillum from the City of Tallahassee. And if we could just give a long, strong round of applause to all of the advocates and victim advocates in the room with us today. They're legion. So this afternoon, we're going to hear from Alea Eastman, a courageous student from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, who's helping to lead the charge against gun violence. We then look forward to hearing from Governor Cuomo and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. We will then join Governor Andrew Cuomo for the signing of legislation removing guns from abusers. This bill is an historic achievement in New York, and I'm so proud to be here for today's signing. At Her Justice, approximately 85% of the women we help are survivors of intimate partner violence, and we're always afraid that their partners might have a gun. Research shows a strong correlation between domestic violence and gun violence. People who are being abused by their partners are at far greater risk of lethal harm when their partner has a gun, and they're often far more afraid to seek help. Sadly, at Her Justice, we have seen this play out not just in statistics, but in individual experiences. One of the most shocking experiences was the example of our client, Cecily, the mother of 3 children. In 2015, Cecily's estranged husband came to her apartment and confronted her about where she had been the night before. He had stalked her before, so this was not unusual, but this night, he pulled out a handgun and shot her in the face, and then fled, leaving her for dead. Cecily collapsed in the stairwell. She crawled back to her apartment, where her children called 911 and saved her life. Today, Cecily is blind in one eye, and her jaw is permanently disfigured. Her husband was convicted of attempted murder and is serving 13 years in the Clinton Correctional Facility. Cecily wanted to be here today, but she is actually appearing at a disability hearing to receive payments she is due because of the injury she sustained because of this horrific gun violence. No one should ever have to experience what Cecily and her children went through. Now, even when it comes to preventing domestic violence, gun safety legislation can be difficult to advance because it's such a hot-button issue. We don't see that much action on it in the rest of the country. But in talking to Governor Cuomo's team this year, it was clear to me how committed they were to this issue, and they got it done. Today, we are taking an extraordinary step forward to keep New Yorkers safe. I now have the honor to introduce a young woman who has become a national voice for gun safety and who is bravely fighting for a safer world for all of us. Please join me in welcoming Alea Eastman.
Hi, my name is Alea Eastman. I'm a junior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. I was in room 1214 during the shooting, which was the third classroom that was hit in the tragedy. 6 students were shot in my class and 2 passed away, Nicholas Doret and Helena Ramsey. Nicholas Doret saved my life. During the shooting, I hid underneath his body. No student should have to hide underneath their classmate's body to survive, but I was that student. I'm not only here to speak about school shootings, but I'm here to talk about gun violence that happens in urban communities every day that goes unnoticed. So I just want everybody to highlight that. It's been 66 days since the shooting at my school, and nothing has changed in Washington. Fortunately, some states are stepping up to take action, like here in New York. This state already has some of the strongest gun laws in the nation, and today Governor Cuomo is taking another step forward. I hope other states and the federal government will look to New York and follow its example. So please join me in welcoming the 56th Governor of New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Good afternoon. How about that, Alea Eastman? Is she something else? Let's give her another round of applause. What a great day, what an exciting day. It's my pleasure to be here. It's my pleasure to be with the hope that springs eternal, the leader of our Democratic House, Leader Nancy Pelosi. Let's give her a big New York welcome. She's joined by her colleagues. We have Carolyn Maloney, Jerry Nadler, and Nydia Velasquez who are with us. Thank you very much. All the elected officials who are here, all the advocates who are here. I was with an advocate who shall remain nameless a few weeks ago, and they said, you know, we advocate, but it's really about getting something done, and we're not getting anything done. Well, today we are getting something done, and we're getting something done in New York. I want to acknowledge some of the people who've worked very hard on this issue. Along with my elected officials, we have Hawk Newsom here from Black Lives Matter. I want to thank you for because, as Alea said, this is a multi-dimensional problem. It's a mass shooting problem, but it's also an everyday shooting problem in urban communities, in poor communities, and communities of color. We have Sonia Osorio from Now. Pleasure to be with you. Let's give her a round of applause. We have Jackie Rowe Adams. Pleasure to be with you. Jackie Rowe has been at this a long time. We have my sister who came in late, but Maria Cuomo Cole is here. Where are you, Maria? I'm very proud of Maria. She just did a movie, a short, they call it, which is entitled Lessons from a School Shooting, that won the Short Film Award at Tribeca Film Festival yesterday. And it's another way of trying to communicate the message and communicate the madness. My sister Maria, I said at my father's eulogy that their relationship was special, that it was the purest form of love between my father and my sister Maria, because she has the heart and the soul of an artist and is pure sweetness and giving, and that really connected with my father. So she was his favorite. I'm okay with that. I'm okay. It took me a long time to come to terms with it, but I'm okay with it now. He loved all the kids, plus or minus. You know, kids, it gets complicated. We have my brother Chris, went over to the other side. He's a reporter. And he's a very aggressive reporter, my brother Chris, so it would get awkward at times. But it would be awkward in a family setting because, you know, you're sitting there at Thanksgiving dinner and he's tweeting what you're saying. And he would say, well, you never said it was off the record. What are you supposed to say? Please pass the cranberry sauce, that's off the record? But he tries. My father enjoyed my success. My father lost in 1994. I won in 2006, so there was a lot of years for my father to reflect back on his loss, and nobody likes to lose, and he was a very competitive guy. I win in 2006, and all my father would say after I won is, Cuomo won, Cuomo won. And I once said to him, I said, Dad, isn't it funny you never mentioned my first name? And he was like, yeah, first names don't count, Cuomo won. He believes they were voting for him, see. He thought that Andrew, they really went right past that to Cuomo. But I'm glad that he had that. He would be proud of Maria and what she did, and he would be so happy about this bill today. Because he was all about having New York lead the way. And that's the New York legacy, and that's what he did, and that's what our electeds did, and that's what we're doing today. So congratulations to all of you. And to Amy Barish and to all the advocates and to Alea and to the young people of Parkland, God bless them for what they are doing. I mean, just the fact that we're having more leadership shown by our young people than our elected officials in Washington says it all. It really does. And everybody can appreciate the frustration and the anger that Parkland is demonstrating, and the young people are demonstrating, and the moms who demand action are demonstrating, because what we are doing, what this nation is doing, justifies common sense. It is just repulsive to people who see what has been going on and see that we're doing nothing in light of it. And it is really repulsive. Las Vegas, Orlando, Aurora, Colorado, Columbine, the church in Texas, Virginia Tech, San Bernardino, Fort Hood, Charleston, Parkland. How many times do you have to have the same situation happen over and over and over again before this nation comes to its senses and says, let's do something to stop innocent people from dying? And there is no rational answer from Washington as to why they're not taking action. After Parkland, there was a very interesting few days where President Trump called everyone into the cabinet room and started asking questions, which were common sense questions. Why do we have to have assault rifles? Why don't we raise the age of purchasing a gun? Why don't we have a mental health background check? That was his first instinct, was common sense questions. 2 days later, he did a 180-degree turn. Why? Because he got a phone call in between. And it was from the NRA. And they respond to the NRA. This is an extreme conservative Congress, an extreme conservative administration that is owned by the NRA. The president stood up and he pledged his allegiance to the NRA, and he's been doing it ever since. And that is the only reason. And how many thousands of innocents have to die for their political allegiance to the NRA? That is what is frustrating and revolting and disgusting about this situation, especially when we know we can do something about it. Now, here in New York, we asked the same question after Sandy Hook, Connecticut, which is very close to the New York border. Sandy Hook, Connecticut, 20 children killed by a mentally ill person, 6 adults killed, 26 people. And we said to Washington, what are you doing about it? What are you going to do? And the silence was deafening. So we said in New York, you know what? If Washington's not going to do something, we're going to do something. And Alea said it's been 66 days since Parkland. 31 days after Sandy Hook, we passed the SAFE Act, which is the strongest, most sensible gun control in the country. And the SAFE Act is important because it shows it can be done. We have in New York everything you see everywhere else in the nation. We just have a different accent. We have big cities, we have rural areas, we have conservative areas. We have everything in New York. And we passed the SAFE Act, which does the same thing we're asking today to be done. The SAFE Act banned military assault rifles, said no more than 10 bullets in a magazine, closed the gun show loophole so people have to get a background check, and it set up a mental health database. We did that 5 years ago. You know what has happened since? Everyone who hunts still hunts. Legal gun owners still have their guns. The world didn't stop spinning on its axis. It wasn't a slippery slope for us to come in and take people's guns. 5 years later, legitimate gun owners who should have a gun have a gun. But what else has happened? New York State is now the 3rd lowest in per capita murders with a gun. We have a mental health database now in this state that has 77,000 people on it. Think about it, 77,000 people who could have bought a gun the day before the SAFE Act was passed now can't buy a gun because they're mentally ill. Common sense gun reform. It can be done, it has been done here, and it's been a proven success. Today we take the next step. What is the next step in common sense gun reform? The nexus between guns and domestic violence. Because domestic violence is horrendous in and of itself. When you add a gun to the mix, it becomes a toxic, volatile combination. And all the statistics prove that. 4.5 million women in this nation have been threatened with a gun. A domestic violence incident where a gun is involved, the woman is 5 times more likely to be killed. 50% of the women killed with a gun in this country were killed by an intimate partner. Women in this country are 16 times more likely to be killed with a gun than women in the other developing nations. Common sense. Common sense. If you have a domestic violence perpetrator, or you have a person with an order of protection, take away the gun. You know the situation is volatile. It's common sense. And in a few minutes, I'm going to sign that bill, and it's going to become the law of the state of New York. And all of this is still not enough. So today we also want to propose the next step in common sense gun reform, which deals with the background check. Right now, if you go to buy a gun, they run a background check through something called the NICS system. If they don't get an answer from NICS, the background check, in 3 days, you automatically have a right to buy the gun. Okay? So you go in, they go to do a background check. If they don't hear back in 3 days, you automatically have a right to buy the gun. What insanity is that? Why would you sell the gun to a person when you, by admission, you don't know who you're selling it to, and you don't know if they can pass a background check? The 3 days is ludicrous. In the state of New York, we're going to extend the 3 days to 10 days, so we have the time to do a right background check. And I'm very proud of what we've done in New York on this issue. And I believe it's made a difference in New York. But if we're going to make a real difference, we need federal reform, because guns cross borders. And I can do everything we can do. I can do everything that we can do in New York. But guns still come up from South Carolina. They still come up from Florida. They can still come in from the West. And until we have federal reform, we're not really going to make the changes that we should make. I hope that New York can serve as an example of what can be done. Yes, the politics were ugly. Yes, passing the SAFE Act was politically hurtful to me, but it can be done, it should be done, and we have 5 years of experience that says when you do it, all the supposed fears and myths of the NRA are disproven by the actuality of the circumstance. Why are we not getting change in Washington? Because you have an extreme conservative contingent that is owned by the NRA. That has to be resolved, or we will be having this press conference over and over and over and over and over again. And in truth, it's not just on the gun issue. There is an extreme conservative element that is against reform, that is against individual rights, that is against diversity, that is against respecting all equally, and they are consistent. Reporters say to me, why do I call them extreme conservatives? I said, because they're extreme and they're conservatives. And you put those two things together, that's extreme conservatives. Why extreme conservatives? Because they believe what they believe, and there's no compromise, and there's no possibility or doubt that maybe they're not 100% right. And they're extreme because not only do they believe what they believe, but they want to take what they believe and impose it on you and your lifestyle. That's what makes it extreme. So they want to have their view of morality, and their view of religion, and their view of lifestyle. And they want to say we impose that on the nation. This from conservatives who started as against big government, against the long arm of federal government interfering. Now they want to dictate how people should live, who they can marry. They want to dictate a woman's right to choose. They want to dictate where the LGBTQ community fits and where they don't fit. They're against immigrants and immigration, the greatest act of hypocrisy in politics, because unless you are a member of the Iroquois, Cherokee, Sioux, Seminole, or Apache, you are an immigrant, and don't forget it. That's right. That is right. That is right. That is right. They're anti-union. They're anti-everything New York believes. They are against everything that makes New York, New York. And they are literally anti-New York. Literally. They passed a federal tax bill last December, which, see, that's New York, Nancy. See that? They are going to let you know how they feel. They passed a federal tax bill that even put the philosophy aside, right? I understand why people could say it was an act of hypocrisy and duplicity to run saying you're going to help the middle class and then do a tax bill where 80% of the benefits go to the top 1% and the middle class get nothing, unless on the theory of we're going to give the big corporations a tax break and maybe they'll be nice and pass it on to the workers, which is bizarre. But put that aside. In that tax bill is a provision that removes the deductibility of state and local taxes from 12 states. What does that mean? That means in states that have an income tax and a property tax, those states, the taxes are going to go up dramatically. It happens next year. Your income tax is no longer deductible. Your property tax is no longer deductible. Taxes in New York will go up about 30%. This was only directed at 12 states. What state pays the highest amount under their bill? State of New York. Funny coincidence about the 12 states. They're all Democratic states. They're all states that voted against Trump. They're all states that don't have a U.S. senator who happens to be a Republican. Coincidence, I'm sure, that it worked out that way. The greatest act of political retaliation in a government policy that I have ever seen. It is disgraceful what they have done. There is only one way to stop this, and there's only one way to have real reform. It has to come from the federal government. We have to change the Congress. There is no talking. There is no rationalizing. There is no reasoning. Our top priority in this state this November is to elect a Democratic House to stop this extreme conservative freight train. We also have to elect a Democratic Senate because there used to be moderate Republicans in this state. They went the way of the dodo bird. They now drank the Kool-Aid, and they brought the Washington gospel to Albany, and I want to send it back to Washington. That's the agenda that we have for November. And Madam Leader, I want you to know, I know you love California, but you're in New York now, and we believe that New York historically and currently provides the progressive beacon for this nation, that we pass the progressive legislation first, and that we set the bar. We have done it on gun control. We've done it on women's protections against sexual harassment this session. We did it when we passed disclosure for internet advertising and digital advertising. We set the bar on what progressive government and what progressive society looks like. And we set that bar for the rest of the nation to follow. New York is the alternative state to Trump's America, and we're proud of it. And we are with you, Madam Leader, 100% of the way. We are your troops. We follow you, and you're going to be proud of what we do come Election Day. Ladies and gentlemen, give Leader Pelosi a big New York welcome. Nancy Pelosi. No?
Aren't we proud of Governor Cuomo? Thank you, Governor Cuomo, for the honor of participating today in this very important life-saving event, signing this important legislation. I'm honored to be here with you once again. I've been here when you have signed legislation to save lives, to promote family, and I'm so happy that you began your remarks by talking about family. As a fan of your father and your mother, I know it took great pride in you and Maria and the whole family. I have my daughter Alexandra here too. She is a filmmaker and she's making a film of us right now. I have to give my New York credentials though. My husband and I, 4 of our 5 children were born in Manhattan. So we have our New York connection. And very honored by it to make that connection. So I'm always a backseat driver telling people, don't go crosstown now, go uptown now, then you crosstown, uptown, and the rest. But I'm honored to be here with members of our official family from the Congress of the United States as well. I heard that Jerry Nadler was here. Jerry will be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, which is the committee of jurisdiction for the gun safety legislation. Carolyn Maloney is here. She will be chair of the Joint Economic Committee for Fairness in Our Economy. Thank you, Carolyn Maloney, for being here. Nydia Velasquez is here. She will be chairwoman of the Small Business Committee. She's been fighting for Puerto Rico, fighting for Dreamers, fighting all the way. Adriana Espaillat is here, the first Dominican Republican, the first Dominican American to be in the Congress of the United States as well. Now, if you saw them on the floor of the House, you would see them wearing a pin that says F. And you're like, what? F means they have each gotten an F from the National Rifle Association because of who they are. We're all honored to be here with our former colleague, Kathy Hochul. Thank you, Kathy Hochul. And speaking of family, Joe Torre, he, with his foundation, has done so much to show how all of these issues of domestic violence and related issues, a solution is also to engage men in changing that policy. Thank you, Joe Torre, and to Alice and your foundation. Madam President, that has a nice ring to it. Thank you for your hospitality at John Jay University School of the Law. Thank you. Now here, look, the governor opened the door to so many subjects. I'm half tempted to speak for 8 hours in 4-inch heels, but that would only prolong the signing of this important legislation. When we hear from Amy and the work that her justice does, it's so inspiring. When we see Black Lives Matter's Mom Demanding Action, now so many organizations here with common values about respecting people and respecting our responsibility to keep them safe. Wasn't she wonderful, Ayala? She is something very special. And speaking of family, she's here with her mommy, her mom, Stacy. We were together. The way Ayala celebrated her birthday was the night before the March for Our Lives. Many of you participated. We were there making signs and posters, and it happened to be your birthday. So that's how you celebrated your birthday, making signs for the march. And now you are making a difference, going around the country, telling your story. You and your colleagues from Parkland, they are going to make the difference. This is the tipping point. This is the tipping point. As the governor said, 19 years ago, Columbine, the list goes on to these little children in Newtown. And now, these teenagers, registering voters, understanding, and I don't want them to be partisan. I want this to be bipartisan across the board, but we have to get it done. And I have said to my Republican colleagues in Congress, not one of your political survivals is more important than the survival of our children. We must pass this legislation. We must pass this legislation. I just, though, want to put this in the context of the governor's leadership in terms of safety issues and respect for women. I had the privilege, self-serving as it is for me to say, put up the self-serving sign, self-serving, to be invited by the governor to be here in May of 2015 when he had an event like this saying enough is enough early on in the lead. And then in 2015, we were here for the sexual assault bill signing ceremony in NYU School of Law. Enough is enough legislation, Governor. And then in 2016 in March, Strong Family, Strong New York, paid family leave proposals. Paid family leave proposals. And then, of course, now we're here today, but in the meantime, that's really important about New York, and we in California feel competitive, yes, because we all have size, we're all affected by SALT, we have diversity. And when we're talking about this legislation that is being signed today, it's important to note that the beautiful diversity of New York is that when women call in, they will be responded to in a very culturally, linguistically appropriate way that saves their lives because New York is so beautifully diverse. So when the governor expanded what he's doing to other states, what he's doing on this coalition, it's called a coalition to combat gun violence. He has expanded now to 7 states, 35 million people in that coalition to stop gun violence. So it's important to note, as the governor has said, that he was courageous with the SAFE Act. 97% of Americans support strengthening background checks, including 97% of gun owners. They know, they care, not the NRA, but the gun owners. So we have common sense bipartisan legislation. We're just asking for a vote, and that is the Thompson-King background check bill. It has 208 co-sponsors. Just give us a vote, Mr. Speaker. And it closes that Charleston loophole that says if it's not a no in 72 hours, it's a yes. That's ridiculous. It has to be. And then it also, we want federal legislation for gun violence restraining orders. What this is called red flag. Some people don't like that title, but the fact is there should be restraining orders against people who have demonstrated their violence, and they certainly should not have guns. As I turn this back over to the governor, I'm not going into many of the issues he raised. Again, I associate myself with his remarks. I just want to say this, because he gave some pretty impressive statistics. But did you know that a woman is fatally shot in America every 16 hours by a former or present domestic partner? Every 16 hours, fatally shot. That's why we're all so grateful to the governor, to the state legislature, for bringing us to this place today, where this signing of this bill will not only save lives, but serve as a model for the rest of the country, and God willing, pretty soon, for passage at the congressional level. So let's get on and sign this bill, Governor. Come on, let's sign this bill.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You go, Phil.
Want to come over? Aaliyah? Amy? Leader Pelosi? Members here for the second, okay?
They're going to do a program and then you guys will line up.
the bill is signed.